Hi, Resmaa. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I want to start by saying, so I just recently read your book, preparing for this interview. I've been hearing about your work more through my wife, which I just mentioned to you. But I read your book, and I just want to start by first sending sincere gratitude for your willingness and courage to put a really different message into this space about racism and trauma and the courage of having a voice out there. I mean, it's a big deal. And this, I was just saying sincere gratitude for having the courage to put a new voice in the space, and also so important for mental health providers to have the lens you're providing. So I just wanted to start there by thanking you.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah.
So I thought a good kickoff point, Resmaa, is to just talk about kind of current affairs, current state of things in America specifically. And, you wrote this book published back in 2017. And a lot's happened since then in terms of just police brutality and against Black Americans, and the national outrage that's really showing up on the streets right now. And so there was something specific you said in the book, which I kind of want to ask you about, which is you said something about we're either going to grow together or tear each other apart. And I'm just curious about how you're framing the problem of racism today in this country, and how you're just kind of, understanding where we're at in the process collectively. We just had another Black American, Jacob Blake, shot in the back 7 times. Such a horrible thing to witness. So I'm just wondering how you're framing everything right now.
Yeah. Well, first off, the reality is that, how when people, when you talk to somebody, they'll ask you how you're doing, but they really don't give a shit about how you're doing. They want to get on to whatever it is they want to talk about. Lately what I've been doing is asking people, how are they sleeping? Asking people, how are they eating? Asking people, how are they processing the grief that's showing up? And I'm asking people that because I'm making the assumption that especially if you're in a Black body or a brown body or your body of culture, or an indigenous body, that you are experiencing not just a individual grief, but you're also experiencing a communal grief. What happened to you and your people did not happen to you individually. It happened to your people for a sustained amount of time. And so for me, the way that I see the current race kind of situation is the way that I've always seen it. And that is that the race question in this country really is not a race question. The race question in this country and in this world is actually a species question. It has always been a species question. The term race was used as the operationalization of race was species. So is Resmaa human? Is Resmaa a monkey? Is he primate? Those ideas and those philosophies have been and was woven into the soil and into every structure of America. And the white body was deemed and supported as being the standard of humanness. And everything else is a deviance from that. And so for me, if you don't understand that, all of these kind of performative things that you see people doing will confuse you. You'll think that that's real progress. You will think that there's something to be gained by seeing that as progress. And I don't, because I look at this in a way that I look at it in a long arc, right? And that long arc, the reality is that the white body is still the standard. White comfort trumps Black liberation. And those pieces are woven through. And so when something like Brother Blake getting shot 7 times, and then you have white people say, my God, I didn't know. And without realizing that when you say that to a person of culture, when you say that, the reaction that you think you should be getting is not the reaction that happens in an embodied sense. Because what happens in an embodied sense when you say, man, I didn't know, wow, this is shocking, we got to do something, bodies of culture are going, yeah, I can't trust you. This stuff has been going on for 500 and 600 years, and you're just now getting it. And so now I'm supposed to be enamored with the fact that you just are getting some taste of it. I don't believe that you've been tempered and conditioned in a way that will allow you to sustain this for the rest of your life. I think you're shocked right now, but sustaining what it will take to make sure that this shifts is a lifelong commitment, not only your life, but your children's 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 life. And I don't believe you have that. And so for me, this whole thing about race and are we getting better and where's the hope and all of that different type of stuff is just performative type stuff. We're not at a place yet, and white people in particular are not at a place yet to where they're really interested in developing community and culture around living embodied anti-racist practices and culture building. And so, that's where I'm at with.
Yeah, thanks, Resmaa. And my sense of what I'm taking away, at least from some of your work, I just recently coming on to your work, is it seems like you're suggesting, if I got this right, like we really need to deal with the body's memory in order to get it into a consistent, more explicit narrative in white bodies. We have to get into the body's memory for that transition that you're saying isn't happening yet.
Exactly right. Exactly right. This is about a living embodied philosophy, understanding, mooring, right? And so when white people say that they're upset about what's going on, I have no doubt that there is an emotional piece to that. But that's not what it's going to take to shift this thing, right? Just your emotional reaction to this that's not curative, right? We're talking about how do you get this in your body? And the only way for me that I think white folks in particular have to get this in their body is that they have to be willing to do the embodied work. Like you said, you read my book. What I tell people is that you cannot read that book and get anything out of it if you're not doing the practices. The practices in that book is the thing. You have to do the practices and then do those practices with other white bodies. You can't just do it. White folks love being individuals. The individual ethos is killing white folks, right? But it is so, people are so enamored around the bootstrap. I did this by myself. I tamed the frontier by myself. I did, right? All of those kind of mythological stories that we tell ourselves get in the way of this embodiment stuff that I'm talking about. And so for me, it's got to start with people beginning to what I believe is in triads, beginning to practice some of these pieces with each other, beginning to create a cultural container so the actual charge of race can be dealt with, not just having the DEI workshop, not just getting, the IDI, not just getting those types of kind of comforting things done and then without building anything. I really believe that if we are going to deal with race as a species question, it's going to have to be intimate. White folks are going to have to get intimate around race. They are not intimate around race. It is cursory at best. And so yeah, to me, it's all about all about living embodiment, and working intimately with each other's body in order to, and I don't mean freaky stuff. I don't, I don't mean freaky body stuff. Cause you know what, man, sometimes I'm talking and I'll be like, okay, I just said, man, I need to go back and say something about that, because I know people will take that and all of a sudden start doing conversion therapy on somebody, and all of a sudden start doing, superseding boundaries and all of that different type of stuff. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the intimacy of somebody knowing, and you letting somebody witness you, you observing them without words. You allow the embodied language to present itself and work with that, as opposed to looking for intellect as your way out of this.
Thanks, Resmaa. Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that a kind of a flash in the pan emotional response at best has no impact, at worst inflames the situation. And that I just want to express my gratitude for the map that you laid out in my grandmother's hands that leads through the body, correct me if I'm wrong, in this paying attention and actually feeling the clean pain. And through accessing our own embodied experience, we can begin to actually unpack and digest the intergenerational centuries of white on white violence, which has now been displaced over 400 years in this country. I'm wondering, in terms of speaking to white bodies, can you explain a little more why it's necessary to confront and digest intergenerational transmission in order to be effective?
Yeah. Well, think about it, Will. This next thing I'm gonna say, many white people, they know it in their bones, but they dare not speak it, right? And it is that most of their ancestors came here fleeing something. Just hold that for a beat. Most of their ancestors came here fleeing something. That energy of fleeing, unmetabolized, right, can wreak havoc on if you just take one person that was fleeing, right? One person that was fleeing, the amount of cortisol that's dropped into the nervous system. Cortisol is only supposed to be in the nervous system, boom, and leave. You piss it out, you do what you move on, right? What about if you're fleeing and that fleeing energy is something that's gotten passed down. So you don't really have a context for it. You just understand it as notions, right? You understand it as vibe. You understand it as sensate, right? But you also are born into a society where that type of knowledge is not a knowledge that's cultivated. It's a knowledge that's pushed off to the side, right? And so one of the things that I say to white folks is that energy of fleeing never got metabolized. As a matter of fact, the fleeing energy got the responses to the fleeing energy actually got standardized as the way to work or the way to do things. Right? That's what makes white body supremacy so vexing for white folks, is that their standard and their virtue is wrapped up in it. Right? So if I'm virtuous, it's really hard to get at the limitations of that virtue. Right? If my virtue is standardized, but my understanding of my virtue got standardized in the context of trauma, of fleeing, right? Then there is really no onus for me to address it. There's nothing, I may get shocked at something, but there's no energy for me to sustain it. So I actually excavate and dig and be careful about it, and then notice the quaking that happens when I'm starting to in the urge to want to stop it. But instead of stopping it, I let it continue to vibrate so something can emerge anew. I don't do that because I'm standardized. And that's did that make sense, Will?
It does.
That's the piece. That's why white people trying to fix Black folks and trying to fix indigenous people and trying to do all that. It'll never work. Because if white folks don't begin to develop culture around that stuff, they'll keep blowing it through my body. They'll keep blowing it through indigenous bodies. They won't have enough space to be able to say, well, maybe we should give, South Dakota back to the indigenous people. Maybe there's no room for that, right? If white people even begin to talk about stuff like that, right? If white people even begin to talk about reparation, let me tell you something. Something just happened to me yesterday, right? I'm walking through Target. I was at Target with my wife and my son. We're walking through Target. Everybody's got on the masks, right? So everybody's walking, blah, blah, blah. And people have started to take these masks and start to actually use them to say things and kind of let you know this is where I'm at with stuff, and stuff is written on there. So I'm walking through, and this white dude comes walking through. He's got a little ponytail. He's walking through, but he's got a mask on. So I got a Biggie Smalls mask on, right? I got a little Biggie Smalls mask. He's got this face mask on that's got Black Lives Matter all across it, right? Just Black Lives Matter, right? And one of the things that I don't do when white people are walking around, in whatever, talking about Black Lives Matter or Indigenous Lives Matters, whatever it is, whatever thing they want to sloganize, I don't see them. I don't like look at them and nod, be like, yeah, I don't do that, because whatever it takes for you to develop a level of maturity, it's not going to be because I'm encouraging you. You're going to have to develop that yourself. That's not my job. And so when I saw him, I just looked back down and was looking at my phone. So he comes, because he tried to catch eyes with me. He tried to catch eyes. All right. So I just put my head down. He kept walking through. But then as he got past me, I looked up, right? And when I looked up, there was this other white dude with his little kid coming the opposite way as that guy was going. So they were going in the opposite way, right? And I looked at him. He didn't see me. And as I'm looking at him, he looks at the other white guy with the Black Lives Matter, and he rolls his eyes. He goes, oh, like that.
Wow.
And I said, that's it right there. Mm-hmm. That shit ain't got nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Right? And intimacy would be them working through that first, not working it through me, not saving me, working that shit and working and what's in there that has been unexamined that should be examined. Right? And then sustaining it and holding it and coming back to it and grinding with it. That's the work.
That's a beautiful example that crystallizes the point really well. Yeah, this is a problem that white people need to get after and take responsibility for to change the culture.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Thank you.
No, nothing else is nothing. We've tried everything else. Black people have tried to appeal to the moral pieces. Indigenous people have tried to appeal to the human pieces. We've tried it all. We've fought. We've not fought. We've said, can I? We've said, I'm going to let you know this. And we get shot in the back and shot in front of our children and shot in the bed while we're sleeping and kneeled on. And then once I die, then you tell everybody what a bad fucking guy I am. I mean, it's just, there's no way, and Black and Indigenous and brown people are going to keep letting white folks know, I'm human. I know you don't believe that. And I'm not talking about your individual belief. I'm talking about your philosophical, structural belief. I've never been considered human. That's woven into the very Constitution. It's woven into the structure. So it is not just about race. It is about the fact that science, military, philosophy, law, economics has this woven into the architecture. So,
yeah, thanks, Resmaa. And sitting in a white body and speaking as a white body, hearing you say what you're saying, I think that the real challenge among white bodies is that when we talk about the implicit strategies that are coming from our bodies, that are strategies of oppression, and in order to maintain some type of opportunity or something, that's all implicit. So there's plenty of people that explicitly think this way. But I think the real challenge is, as white bodies, how do we challenge ourselves if that's not what we're thinking, but that's what we're feeling, and we don't know, it.
Right.
And that we're actually acting from maintaining opportunity in a social structure, and we're not willing to go look and see that we're still doing that. And it's again, I'm just, I think your work is pointing out, like, wake up, we're behaving from this body-based level, and looking at that body-based level is threatening to a white body.
Exactly.
That's the issue.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So, and one of the things I would say, Keith, we have to stop talking about the things that we're going through as feelings. A lot of times we say, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. And what's actually going on is that there's an overall experience. There is a vibratory experience. There is an image and thought experience. There is a meaning-making experience. There is a behavioral and urge experience. There is a affect and feeling experience. There is a sensate and sensation experience. But we couch that all as feelings, right? It's not an operational frame, right? When you say, I'm feeling this, there's a genuflect to emotionality. That's one frame. That's one piece, right? People are having an overall experience. And so white folks, a lot of times when you're talking about race, they're having an experience, but they have not developed an embodied language or articulation or a cultural language or articulation for what that experience is. So they say, I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling that. And that's actually not getting to what the experience is. And so I would argue with you that this is not just housed in the implicit. I would argue with you that it is explicit, right? But it is so, because there is no context for how to deal with the explicit, you just don't address it because your bodies are standardized. Right. And so I think like people are doing all this this implicit bias training and stuff like that, and DEI work and all this stuff, and that's not getting at it. The reason why it's not getting at it is because we're starting with a frame that doesn't work to get at it. So for instance, let me ask you guys a question. So when you talk about like DEI work, right? When you talk about diversity and inclusion and all that different type of stuff, let me ask you a question. When you say, I've been in workshops or experiences where I've asked everybody in there and I say, hey, raise your hand if you believe in diversity. Everybody raised their damn hand. Raise your hand if you believe in inclusion. Everybody raises their hand, right? And then I ask this question, diverse from what? Because if you're saying diversity, you're saying you're starting with a standard first and you want to diversify from that standard. What is the standard that we all know it, but we never say it? We all know that when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about diversifying from the white body as being standard. But if you never say it, then diversity can mean, collard green Wednesday. It can be Quinceañera Tuesday. It can be, dream catcher you know what I mean? It becomes this kind of very surface understanding of culture and what we're dealing with. And what I would say is that part of the problem is that we haven't defined diversity in a way that actually allows white people to actually deal with the pain of it in their gut and work with it. So what do we say? Diversity is everything. We're looking at the diverse tapestry of the world and how the diverse, right? And then bodies of culture go to those training and like, man, I don't want to do this. Because I get filleted open, white people asking me all of these questions, this white woman over there in the corner starting to cry, and I just feel like I want to choke the shit out of her, right? Because now everybody's supposed to lean in, and that's on the same par as what I'm dealing with. Right. And it's because, so my organizing mooring definition of kind of like the somatic abolitionist idea is the white body is the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically. If you don't understand that, if you can't hold on to that, you will start to do things that will support white body supremacy. You will continue to do that because that's the standard. And so for me, when it comes to things like diversity and include, like the next question, if I was to say, if you believe in inclusion, what are we including in? You know what I mean? What's the standard? What are we saying? We're saying we want to include in what? We want to include Black people into what? Right? And you have to start with that organizing piece around the white body, because otherwise it becomes, and people are making billions of dollars off of this implicit bias stuff. They're making billions of dollars off of this DEI work, right? And it goes unchallenged. And what I'm saying is that the reason why it's unusable when you're talking about liberation, the reason why it's unusable when you're talking about organizational change and organizational growth, the reason why it's unusable is that the context that exists will only get you what you already have. It will not get you it will not get you to the liberation of people, because that's not the design of it. This system is not broken. This system is operating exactly the way it was designed to operate, right? And so, but see, when I'm saying this, there's a lot of white people that's listening to this now that have already turned this off. There are a lot of white people that have listened to this now, that started off listening to this, that are now so fucking mad at me and mad at you right now. And you're gonna get some emails wanting to speak to your manager. Wanting to speak to your manager and stuff. It's just like, this is because I'm talking about a standard that does not center white folks. I'm talking about a standard that says, look, y'all got to work this. And this is one of the reasons why I have stopped saying white privilege. I don't say white privilege anymore. I say white advantage. In a society that's predicated, and in a world that's predicated on the white body being the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured philosophically and structurally, in a world like that, it is an advantage, before you mumble one word or say one thing, it is an advantage to be born into a white body. Before anything else, it is an advantage to be born in a white body in a society that's structured and predicated on the white body being the standard and everything else being a deviance from that standard. And so I say white advantage. But that, now you will have white people that will have a reflexive response that says like, well, aren't we all humans first, right? And so when you hear that, what you're watching people do is that they're playing with the structural pieces, and then they're playing with the innate pieces and the intrinsic pieces, right? And I stop people from doing that. Don't play with that, right? Yes, innately and intrinsically, I am a worthy, adequate human being, right? But that ain't what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the structural beast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're naming, that's not the problem.
That's right.
The problem is white body supremacy.
Exactly.
And we're not, what you're saying is we're not constellating around the problem in diversity work.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Not only are we not constellating around it, we don't even see it as a problem.
Right.
Right. You guys have been in those diversity trainings, right? You've seen them, right? You can see that something in your gut goes, this ain't getting it. And you go through the whole thing, the whole 2 days, and you go, that was cool, but right? That's there's this kind of unease about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say that all my training historically, I would leave going, did we actually get anywhere?
That's right.
That's what would be happening in my body.
That's exactly right. Did we actually, what was this for? And then you know what happens? You leave like that with that question, and bodies of culture leave wounded and rewounded.
Right.
And filleted open. And not knowing why they keep putting themselves through that. That's what happened, right? And it's because white bodies and the diversity racket, they understand, don't make white people nervous. Don't make white people nervous. So even though we're going to be talking about this stuff, we want to make sure that we make everybody comfortable. Right? We want to make sure that we use words that some white people might get a little nervous, but the majority of white people will say we did a good job. Right? That's it. That's the racket. That's the play. And if you're going to be doing what I call somatic abolitionist work, you're going to have to hold on to the fact that people are not going to like what you're doing. People are going to hate it. People are going to say you're racist, you're reverse racist, and you're that you don't like white people, and all of that different type of stuff. And those are just dodges. And so, yeah.
Well, that reminds me of in your book talking about the myth of white fragility, and the kind of this myth that white folks can't tolerate any level of challenge to their values, to their blind spots, to to look inside, as you say, and actually feel the pain. And it also reminds me of a story you shared in the book about how I believe you said that your wife Maria noticed you taking care of white people by crossing the street or by making room for them. And
that's it.
And I'm wondering if you could speak. I think it'd be helpful to hear a little more about your kind of deprogramming, if you will, or your healing process, if you'd be willing to share that.
So one of the strategies that bodies of culture have had to learn in order to navigate a white body supremacist world is we've had to learn how to racial cape, right? Racial caping is that your first move is to always keep white people calm by getting bodies of culture not to voice what needs to be voiced, right? So you keep giving up yourself, right, in order to keep white people calm, because when white people get nervous, Black people die. When white people get nervous, Indigenous people lose their land. When white people get nervous, people get inflamed, towns get burned because a supposed 12-year-old Black kid named Emmett Till whistled at a white girl, right? The whole town's people get hung from bridges when that type of stuff happens. So we know in our bodies that our relationship together, right, is fraught with us trying to make sure that y'all calm the fuck down, right? And so my wife, I didn't realize just how much I was doing that until my wife told me I was doing it, right? And in the book, I talk about how, when we first started dating, we'd be walking down the street, white person would be coming, and I would drop her hand and then walk and move out of the way so the person would keep coming. And my wife just watched me do that like 3, 4, 5 times. And then one time we were doing it, we were going down the street, and she stopped me. And because I was starting to pull away, and she stopped me and grabbed my hand, pulled back, and stopped me right there in the middle of the sidewalk. And she looked at me, she goes, "Stop fucking doing that. Stop fucking doing that." And I'm like, what are you, like, I don't even know what I'm doing, right? And I said, what is it? Why are you so mad? Why are you so mad? And she was like, every time a white person comes, every time they come, she goes, I watch you get nervous. I watch you start moving. And then you, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to be nice. I'm just trying to be, help. She goes, you are doing some bullshit. You're doing some bullshit. She goes, and then she looked at me and she goes, they ain't even thinking about moving out of your way. Right? She goes, white folks have been conditioned to have Black people be in deference to them. That's been the whole thing. And she said, and you don't see it. Now, and I was a practicing therapist there, right? So a couple of times later, we walking down the street, right? This might even been maybe 3 or 4 months later, we're walking down the street. And as we're walking down the street, the white woman is coming, right? And I'm seeing it, and I'm watching my body like do this thing in my gut, like, oh shit. And I didn't even, until my wife said it, I didn't even know it was there, right? And she said, and I was like, and I was holding it for a bit, and then I grabbed her hand a little tighter, and we were walking, because I already know she peeping it. I already know she knows, right? So
She's
I'm
got
walking.
Your number.
She already knows. So we walking, and all of a sudden, I don't get off the side. That white lady walked right into me. Boom, right there. And she goes, oh, like that. And then she skirted around. She goes, I'm sorry. She walked around, and she goes, my wife stopped me. She goes, you are 6'1". How in the fuck couldn't she see you? The reason why she couldn't see you, because you're not supposed to be here. And I said, I get it. I get it. And that was the last time I started doing that. I was like, I'm not doing that shit. I'm not jumping around. I'm just not. Now, I realize that is a very risky proposition, right?
Right.
Not to take care of white bodies, because white bodies have been conditioned for my body to take care of their body, right? To perform, to do things, to anticipate, right? That not doing that is a proposition rooted in death, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying, when I say rooted in death, some people will hear me as hyperbole. I'm not fucking talking hyperbole. I'm talking white people or Black people not making white people feel comfortable is a recipe for death.
And that's been passed down and experienced over at least 400 years.
Exactly.
So,
and not just experienced in my body, but also experienced in the white body. See, that's the piece, is that white bodies have not, they don't even know that the stuff that we're talking about, they don't even know that's something that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Because they don't have to think about it.
Don't have to. It's not even part of the equation. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's why when people say, have things gotten better, and people are having these epiphanies, I can't tell you the number of white friends from high school contacted me after Floyd died. Brother Floyd got murdered, right? Oh my God, and you're up in Minneapolis and all this different type of stuff. Each one that did that reached out to me, I blocked. Everyone. You will not be sucking my life energy, right? With me trying to explain to you and then me getting wounded in the process. I'm not doing that. So, yeah. Did that explain?
Well,
Sure did. Yeah.
Feeling a lot of gratitude for the fierceness in Maria to challenge you that way, to wake you up.
Man, it was that, that's who she is. I mean, She calls it like she sees it, and it was helpful. But yeah, that these are the things, But I remember my mom doing similar stuff. I remember, in the Black community, those are strategies. Like when somebody is walking around in a fucking zombie state, the strategy is to, look, I can't make you do it, but look, let me just peep you to this, right? And that's that. Those are the types of things that we've had to do in order to navigate the communal brutality that happens to us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we're definitely talking a lot about racialized trauma and the strategies that develop, right? And just curious if you want to unpack a little more just the sense of self that can happen among Black Americans and their mind and mental health, and just we're talking to mental health providers that they need to know more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, think about it, man. You can go through all of your education and never have one section about racialized trauma.
That's right.
It's not standard, right? And so the white body, even in our field, is the standard, right?
Yep.
And so there's this weathering that occurs being in a structure by which the white body is the standard. There is a weathering that occurs, right? On the nervous system, on the musculoskeletal system, on the reproductive system, on the brain architecture, on the cardiovascular system. There is a weathering that occurs, right? And that weathering gets passed down, decontextualized. Racialized trauma in a person over time can look like personality. Racialized trauma in a family over time can look like family traits. Racialized trauma in a people over time can look like culture, right? And so the weathering effects of my great-great-great-grandmother being raped over and over and over and over again, and then not only just her, but then the other women on that plantation, and then the men also engaging in that activity, right? That the racial that think about that. Think about somebody being raped. That's one thing, but somebody being raped and it's sanctioned.
It's a whole different level.
It's a whole different level.
Yeah.
The amount of there's no reprieve. We know in trauma work that there needs to at some point be reprieve and repair. We don't even acknowledge that the rapes even occurred. We say that happened so long ago, y'all should be over that. The brutality of Black woman's body being torn apart, and the Black man's body being torn apart. And now what I just said, and I'm just watching y'all, you noticed something. Something was happening for you. There was something happening, either shutting down or stirring or something wanted to move or something, right? In that piece, as you notice that stirring, imagine the stirring in a Black body. Now, put a baby inside that body with the levels of cortisol, levels of norepinephrine, the protective hormones, right, that don't recede. So now you're having a baby being born in that at the time that their very nervous system is being developed. So what gets imprinted on that is notions of danger without any context. So by the time it gets to me and I'm having these urges and these ideas and I think I'm crazy and something's wrong with me, but nobody's ever told me that stuff, because of the way that my mother's nervous system was organized around her mother's nervous system, was organized around her mother's nervous system. By the time it gets to me, my mother can't talk to me about that because it's decontextualized. So what happens is then we put the defect inside of us as opposed to what happened to us. This is what, if we're doing this type of work around trauma and racialized trauma, you have to understand those pieces, because otherwise you start looking for cures.
Right.
Yeah, you're looking for relief.
You're looking for relief.
Help the person to get relief versus
to help the person understanding context and then processing the embodied context so the energy can be metabolized, right? As opposed to trying to cure it and wipe it away and yoga it away and Christian it away and Buddhism it away, and, right? All of that different type of stuff, right? It's got to be metabolized, right? It's one of the reasons why in my book, I don't have white people working with bodies of culture. I don't have white people, because I believe white people got to do that work with each other first, so there's more room available. Otherwise, it just becomes prescriptions.
I think I just got something really important from you, Resmaa. I want to check it out. It sounds like you talk in the book a lot about metabolizing trauma, which is how Keith and I like to talk about it too. But there's a piece that you just gave of, it's sort of like if you're going to metabolize, if you're going to change something inside of a crucible to something else, you got to have the context.
Yeah.
And as a container.
You're exactly right.
And
exactly right.
That's
and that context, that crucible has to be thick enough to withstand the charge of 400 and 500 years of brutality. And many times, white healing professionals don't have a thick enough crucible to actually withstand that charge because they haven't done their own stuff.
Right.
And so when stuff gets too hot, they crack apart.
Right.
Because they can't hold it.
Right. And then you put a Band-Aid on it. You do something to divert it, to avoid
That's
it.
Right. Or you blow it through, or you blow it back through those bodies. Something must be wrong. Something's really wrong with you. I need to, this is way, that the problem is in the person.
Sure.
Right. And so, yeah. The crucible building, the container building is the most important part. When I work with organizations, I start them off with a year of learning first, with just a small group of people that can begin to do the embodied work with each other first, to begin to develop the container. The container doesn't exist first. You have to actually create it. So the charges, so the speed, so the weight, so the texture, so the direction, all of that stuff can be housed in one place first, and then all of that stuff starts to cook in there, right? This is the problem why when people start saying, well, we need to have a conversation on race, and then they wonder why they can't get people to come back. Because you haven't built a container that can hold that charge. Right. So, yeah.
And this is partly the conversation of clean and dirty pain.
That's
I'm
clean and dirty.
Like this is about building the container, and that becomes clean pain.
That's right.
When there's a container.
That's exactly right. As adults, see. When it comes to race, white people as a collective are infants because there really is no. There's no, and somebody's going to hear me say this, well, what about the abolitionists? Look, if you really read what some of the abolitionists, the white abolitionists, the only abolitionists, if you're going to show me something, just give me what John Brown wrote. John Brown put his body in the middle of this, right? There was an embodied ethos that he had that said, I am going to use myself in order to make sure that this institution crumbles at my feet, right? That's not what most of the abolitionists were saying. Most of the abolitionists were either saying we need to have a segregationist stance, meaning that that we need to help them have their own because they are really not the same species as us, or we need to have an integrationist stance, which means that they need to come closer to white people, be more like white people, and therefore they will get right. That's not real. I mean, that's the abolitionist stance, but that ain't the shit that I want to be involved in, right? What we're talking about is an embodied anti-racist practice, understanding, and culture building. And that doesn't exist for white folks right now. That has to be developed. So yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it brings me to, did you term the vagus nerve the soul nerve? Was that you? Yeah. I love that term.
Yeah.
So it brings me to when we're talking about containers.
Yeah.
That we're partly talking about the soul nerve, right? Acting as a container for the work, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you want to just speak to that.
Yeah, man. So in my new book I'm writing now, I'm talking about not only the soul nerve, but I'm talking about the soul muscle. And the soul muscle is the psoas muscle, right? That psoas muscle, man, is a beast. That psoas muscle, that psoas muscle connects the top part of the body with the lower part of the body and shows up in the hips. And it is why when you're working with some clients and some people in some communities where you see this kind of ethos around locking down, around stuckness, around pain in the hip and stuff like area, and people want to go to manipulate that and try and figure out how to, give some relief to it. And honestly, there are parts of that psoas muscle that the reason why it is locking down, the energy of it is not even yours. It's the pass through. It's how you got organized by watching what your mama and your daddy recoiled from and leaned into. Right? And your body got organized around that. And that locking down, that hip muscle, that psoas, is the mobilizing, immobilizing muscle of the body. Right? If it locks it down because it's safe to lock it down, it mobilizes because it's safer to mobilize, right? And so the vagal nerve, man, that thing it's why it's the vibratory. It's why you could talk to your mom, or talk to your brother, or talk to somebody that you love, and you could be talking to them, and all of a sudden you go, "What's wrong?" And they'll go, "Nothing's wrong," and you'll go, "Nah, something's happening." Right?
Yeah.
That's the vagal nerve constricting. Right? That's the vagal, right? It's why you have gut reactions to something. And you're like, man, I don't know, but you have some type of experience going on in your belly, but you don't have an embodied articulation of it, but something is off, right? We have to allow that energy to emerge, right? But that has to be cultivated, not individually, but by grinding and allowing yourself to be seen and witnessed, right? That's how that happens.
Yeah, it's that social emotional radar system that we have to give full permission to.
That's right. It has to be cultivated
to work.
Exactly
to work
right.
The way it's designed to work.
But because the working of it means that you have to calibrate it. The working of it means that you have to develop an attunement, right? Not just a therapeutic attunement, but there's an attunement to where if I've gone through some somatic abolitionist stuff, and we've been doing it for a year and a half. When I walk into a room and you walk into a room and somebody says something, and we done been intimate with each other for a year, and you've allowed me to witness you and observe you and share with you and do all that different type of stuff. Not verbal sharing, but just like work with my body, not freaky stuff once again, but just observe me and work with my body. When I walk into a room and something funky is said, or there's a vibe, I already know we have a shared understanding, a shared language, a shared mooring, that there's certain things that you know that you should be doing as a white body, and certain things that you need to lean into or pull back from or yield, right? Because we've done some of you've done it over here, I've done it over here. So when we get into a room and somebody says something, now all of a sudden we have a different mooring between us, right? But that can't happen if white people don't even see the need for it.
Right. It's that container, that context.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk about blue bodies for a few minutes.
Let me tell you something about the book now. So my new book, I've stopped saying blue bodies. I'm not going to say blue body. It's a fucking blue shirt. It's not a body. And right. So, and I got some feedback. My brother's a cop, and he's one of the ones that said that to me. He said, dude, I love your book, all that different type of stuff. He said, but what I experience when I take off my uniform as a black man is not the same thing that these white boys experience. Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you.
And so I think all of the same things that I was saying work, but I'm not equating a career with a body anymore. And you know, you learn, you know, in writing, you learn something. You learn something. It's an evolving process. So
right. That sounds like a good update.
Yeah.
I have a brother-in-law who is a career police officer as well, and so hearing you talking about, you know, your brother, his experience with the department in Dallas, it really resonated deeply with me, and just the way that you described, you know, facing these incredibly intense experiences over and over, day after day, being expected to sleep well and go back and show up.
That's it.
As if nothing happened.
Exactly right. Exactly.
I'm wondering, what are you still working with police departments?
I'm still working with some. I have had to. I've had to really kind of watch my own energy output with police departments. In some ways, the same way that I work with other organizations, is that if you're willing to, here's one of the things that happens, is that this embodied work is a different type of work. It is exhausting to do embodied anti-racist work. Like, I could go in and do a DEI training and be like, yeah, I'm not, nobody's working this hard, right? But when I do these trainings, I am exhausted, right? Because I'm having to hold all of those nervous systems, right?
Makes sense.
And so I've had to really evaluate whether or not I want to keep doing that if the organizations that I'm working with are not committing. Number one, they're not committing to saying that they want to do it for a long period of time. If they're not going to pay me to do it, like, you know, well, we got to wait for a grant. I don't do grants. I'm not doing that, because because what happens is that if you have to wait for a grant and you start to work, and this is just my experience, if you have to wait for a grant and I start to work, when stuff starts getting too close for those bodies that said that they wanted it, the first thing that happens is that they stop having me come, and therefore, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I don't do so I've really had to evaluate over the last year or two how much I want to invest in that. I do some investing, but it really is, I need to have if I'm going to be working with police departments again, there's going to have to be a whole lot of commitment up front, and it's going to have to be guaranteed up front, and not just the money, but that they're going to work this through and be willing to look at it from the ground up.
It makes sense. I mean, on both levels of fair exchange, and also you wanting to actually have a lasting impact on the level that you know is possible.
And I want bodies. I want indigenous bodies and brown bodies and black bodies to stop being murdered, and the murder being sanctioned. You know, This qualified immunity stuff is it's a license to kill Black and brown bodies. It always has been. You know how people are saying, you have people that are saying, I didn't know that the police were doing this and all this different type of stuff. And the thing that pops into my head is like, there has never been a time in America where the police were not sanctioned to kill Black bodies. If you really look at policing as it relates to Black bodies, there has never been a time where the sheriff in an old Southern town wasn't also the Ku Klux Klan member. There has never been a time where the sheriff's daughter wasn't married to the judge that came around, right? These pieces that we go, man, I wish things would go back to the way they were. When Black people go, this is the way that they were. There had the cleave that you think the cleave that you think was there between people who want to destroy Black bodies and those that are there to protect you. That cleave that you think is there has never been there.
Right. Again, setting the context. Right. If the context is to go back to what's already always been the problem, that's not the right context.
It's not the right context. It's not the right context. So yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end here soon, but
yeah,
we could talk for hours. First off, I want to give you an opportunity to say what you're up to. How can people get more of your work? Get on the train here to do some work.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is to go to resmaa.com. resmaa.com. I have a free e-course up there as well as a paid e-course and some more classes that are coming. I'm actually working on kind of a cert program. I also think that start reading a book and start doing the practices. And even when you get a year into the book and you're done with it, if you do 2 chapters a month, even when you're done with it, then go back and read it again. There's a process that I call soul scribing, where I have people actually write based on those vimbas, the vibes, the images, the meaning, like just write on that and scribe on it, and don't talk about it first. Just scribe on it, then go back and read what you wrote, and then share what you wrote. I've been having white bodies and bodies of culture do that and develop triads and stuff like that. And so you can find information out about that on resmaa.com. I'm working with a couple organizations, embodiedgatherings.com, working with Education for Racial Equity, doing a lot of workshops for them and stuff like that. So just become a friend on my Instagram, because I put out free content on my Instagram every day, 4 times a week. I put things for people just to contemplate and look at, small bite-sized pieces, 1 to 2 minutes. So just, hit me up on Instagram and let's do that.
Great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we wrap up with the same question with every guest.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you had a billboard that
just like Diesel Samero.
Yeah, exactly. That every human would see once in their lifetime, right?
Right.
There's a paragraph on there. Every human would see it once in their lifetime.
Right.
What would you say to them?
I would say, let's usher in a living, embodied philosophy that's predicated on somatic abolitionism.
Right. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Well, Resmaa, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Deep pleasure to be with you, Resmaa. Thank you for your work.